Worst case of bad parenting you have ever seen. Growing up, I knew a girl named Emily whose life was a strange mix of privilege and torment, courtesy of her mother. From the very beginning, it seemed like Emily's mom had made it her mission to systematically undermine and belittle. It wasn't always obvious, but looking back, the signs were glaringly clear. Emily was a bright and lively kid, but her mom was always quick to paint her as fragile and weak. If Emily had a soccer competition the night before, her mom would insist she skip school the next day to recover. This wasn't about letting Emily relax or unwind. It was about embedding a narrative that she was too delicate to handle life's regular challenges. This constant coddling masked as concern was just one of the many ways her mother chipped away at her self-esteem. Despite these manipulative tactics, Emily was a healthy and active kid. She loved sports, did well in school, and had a vibrant social life. But no matter how well she did, her mom was always there with a subtle jab or a backhanded compliment to remind her she wasn't quite good enough. Things took a weird turn when Emily's mom decided to marry an older man she believed was wealthy. Suddenly, Emily found herself whisked away to a life of luxury. They moved into a big house, went on expensive ski holidays, and even took trips to New York just to shop for school clothes. It was a drastic change, and Emily didn't quite know how to feel about it. On one hand, the material benefits were hard to ignore. On the other, her mom's attitude towards her seemed to grow colder and more disdainful with each passing day. As they settled into their new life of supposed affluence, Emily's mom started complaining incessantly about how shallow, entitled, and spoiled Emily was becoming. This was rich coming from a woman who had just bought herself a brand new Mercedes. The hypocrisy was staggering. Emily was caught in a confusing whirlwind where she was both pampered and berated, showered with luxury, but starved of genuine affection and support. In this environment, Emily struggled to find her footing. Her mother's constant criticism and contradictory behavior left her feeling unmoored. On the surface, it seemed like she had everything a girl could want. But beneath the veneer of wealth and privilege, there was a deep sense of inadequacy and confusion. She began to question her worth, wondering if she truly was the spoiled, ungrateful child her mother painted her to be. Despite the chaos at home, Emily tried to maintain some normalcy in her life. She threw herself into her studies and extracurricular activities, hoping to find solace and validation outside the toxic bubble her mother had created. But even her achievements were tainted by her mother's relentless negativity. If Emily aced a test, her mom would say it was because the teacher was easy. If she scored a goal in soccer, her mom would point out how the other team was weak. Nothing was ever good enough, and every success was diminished by a constant stream of disparagement. Emily's relationship with her stepfather was another complicated layer. At first, he seemed like a decent guy, albeit a bit aloof. He indulged Emily and her mother with lavish gifts and trips, but he never really engaged with them on a deeper level. Over time, it became clear that he was just as deluded about his wealth as Emily's mom had. The money, which had once seemed endless, started to dwindle, and the cracks in their opulent lifestyle began to show. As the financial strain increased, so did the tension at home. Emily's mom became even more critical and bitter, lashing out at Emily for every little thing. She blamed Emily for their problems, accusing her of being the reason they were struggling. It was an absurd accusation, but in the twisted reality of their household, it was just another layer of psychological manipulation. By the time Emily reached high school, she was emotionally exhausted. The constant barrage of negativity and the unstable home environment had taken a toll on her. She started to distance herself from her family, spending more time with friends and at school activities. It was her way of escaping the toxic atmosphere, if only for a few hours a day. Emily's friends noticed the change in her. She became quieter, more reserved, and less confident. They tried to support her, but she was reluctant to open up about the true extent of her problems at home. She didn't want to burden them or be seen as weak, so she kept most of her struggles to herself. One day, Emily confided in me about what was really going on. We were sitting in the park, enjoying a rare sunny afternoon, when she finally broke down. She told me everything: the constant criticism, the mixed messages, the financial instability. It was like a dam had burst, and all the pain and frustration she'd been bottling up came pouring out. I listened, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. It was hard to believe that someone as vibrant and talented as Emily could be made to feel so worthless by her own mother. I reassured her that she wasn't the problem, that her mom's behavior was a reflection of her own issues and insecurities. Emily nodded, but I could tell it was going to take a lot more than words to undo the damage that had been done. From that day on, I made it my mission to be there for Emily, to support her in any way I could. We spent countless hours talking, studying, and just hanging out. Slowly but surely, she started to regain some of her confidence. She threw herself into her passions, excelling in both academics and sports. Despite her mother's attempts to undermine her, Emily was determined to carve out a life for herself that wasn't defined by negativity and manipulation. As graduation approached, Emily received a scholarship to a prestigious university. It was a hard-earned victory, a testament to her resilience and determination. Her mom's reaction was predictably lukewarm, but by then, Emily had learned to tune out the negativity. She packed her bags and left for college with a sense of hope and a determination to build a better future for herself. In middle school, Emily's self-esteem took another hit. I remember one day during recess when Emily excitedly told me she was really good at math. Her eyes lit up with a rare spark of pride. But before I could respond, her mother, who was standing nearby, immediately shot her down. "No, you're not," she said sharply. "You just think you're good at math, but you're really not." It was a pattern that became all too familiar. Every time Emily mentioned the possibility of being good at anything, her mother was there to cut her down. When Emily showed an interest in sports, her mom dismissed her as lazy and unmotivated, spreading these lies to anyone who would listen. It was as if she couldn't bear the thought of Emily succeeding at anything. As Emily entered her teenage years, the tension at home escalated into full-blown conflict. Fights between her and her mother became a daily occurrence, often escalating to the point where the police were called. At first, the officers tried to mediate, but it didn't take long for them to grow weary of the constant calls. Eventually, they started telling Emily and her mom to sort out their issues themselves, clearly frustrated with being dragged into the ongoing drama. Then tragedy struck when Emily's stepfather passed away. With his death, the fragile facade of their financial stability crumbled, and the bills began piling up. Desperate to maintain control over Emily and the child support payments that came with her, Emily's mother resorted to increasingly drastic measures. She threatened to kill Emily, then herself, locked her out of the house, and even threw her belongings out onto the lawn. But each time, she would follow these outbursts with apologies and expensive gifts, trying to lure Emily back home. Emily was caught in a cycle of manipulation and abuse. Her mother needed her to stay at home to keep the child support flowing, but at the same time, she did everything in her power to make Emily feel worthless. She continued to badmouth Emily to anyone who would listen, calling her names like slut and attacking her character. It was a relentless assault on her self-worth, designed to keep her dependent and controlled. At one point, when Emily was 19, I tried to intervene. I pointed out to her mother that Emily was an adult now, hoping it might shift her perspective. Her response was a vehement, "No, she's not." That was the last time her mother spoke to me, and frankly, I was relieved. It was clear that reasoning with her was futile. Emily's relationship with her mother was a toxic roller coaster, with moments of false peace punctuated by chaos and abuse. Despite this, Emily remained determined to carve out a better future for herself. She knew that leaving home would mean losing the financial support, but she also understood that staying would destroy her soul. She started working part-time jobs to save up money and made plans to move out as soon as she could afford it. Her mother, sensing the impending loss of control, ramped up her efforts to keep Emily tethered. Emily was resolute. She had tasted freedom during her time at college and knew she couldn't go back to living under her mother's oppressive rule. Finally, the day came when Emily had saved enough to move out. She found a small apartment and packed her things quietly, not wanting to trigger another one of her mother's explosive episodes. As she walked out the door, her mother screamed threats and insults, but Emily kept walking, her resolve unshaken. Moving into her own place was a revelation. For the first time, Emily could breathe without the constant cloud of her mother's negativity hanging over. She decorated her apartment with things that made her happy, surrounded herself with friends who genuinely cared for her, and focused on her studies and work. As Emily settled into her new life, her struggles with her mother continued to haunt her, but she was determined to move forward. One of our mutual acquaintances once remarked, How can the daughter be expected to grow up when her mother still hasn't? It was a poignant observation that encapsulated the heart of the problem. Emily's mother, with all her manipulative and destructive behaviors, had never truly matured emotionally, and that stunted growth had poisoned their relationship. Eventually, Emily managed to secure a spot in a university residence. It was a significant step towards gaining independence and breaking free from her mother's toxic grip. Living on campus meant she was finally clear of the daily manipulations and emotional turmoil. Emily had her faults, as we all do, but the majority of her struggles were the direct result of her mother's incessant undermining and emotional abuse. Reflecting on the situation, I found myself grappling with a mix of anger and bewilderment. How could someone mess up basic parenting so thoroughly? It wasn't about the expensive clothes or the trips to the beautician. Those were superficial trappings of love. What Emily needed was something far simpler and more profound. Genuine support, encouragement, and love. Was that really so hard? Apparently for her mother, it was. Instead of nurturing her daughter, she had chosen to project her own insecurities and failures onto Emily, warping her perception of self-worth. It wasn't just a failure of parenting, it was a deliberate, almost pathological campaign to keep Emily under her thumb. Despite this, Emily's resilience was nothing short of remarkable. In her university residence, she began to find her footing. The freedom from her mother's constant scrutiny allowed her to explore her interests and talents without fear of immediate reprisal. She joined clubs, made friends, and started to experience the world in a way she never could while living at home. One evening, Emily called me, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had joined the university's debate team and was preparing for her first competition. It was something she had always wanted to do, but never had the confidence to pursue. Now, with the toxic cloud lifted, she was ready to take on new challenges. The debate competition went exceptionally well. Emily's team won, and she was singled out for her articulate arguments and poise under pressure. It was a victory that meant more to her than just a trophy. It was a validation of her intelligence and capability, a direct contradiction to the lies her mother had fed her for years. As Emily continued to grow and thrive, she began to see a therapist to help untangle the emotional knots left by her mother's abuse. It was a difficult process, filled with painful revelations and moments of deep sorrow, but it was also profoundly healing. She started to understand that her worth was not defined by her mother's twisted perceptions, and she began to build a healthier sense of self. Emily's journey was far from over, but she was on a path to recovery and self-discovery. She pursued her studies with a passion, delving into subjects that fascinated her and excelling academically. Her friends became her new family, offering the support and encouragement she had always craved. Slowly but surely, she was reclaiming her life and forging a new identity free from her mother's shadow. In the years that followed, Emily graduated with honors and landed a job in a field she was passionate about. She moved into her own apartment, a cozy space filled with personal touches that reflected her newfound sense of self. Her relationship with her mother remained strained and distant, but Emily had learned to set boundaries and protect herself from further emotional harm. One day, I visited Emily in her new apartment. As we sat in her living room, sipping coffee and catching up, I couldn't help but marvel at how far she had come. The confident, capable woman before me was a far cry from the frightened, insecure girl I had known. Emily had faced unimaginable challenges and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. She shared stories of her work, her travels, and the new hobbies she had taken up. There was a light in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, a genuine joy and enthusiasm for life. It was clear that she had found a sense of peace and fulfillment that had eluded her for so long. Reflecting on her journey, Emily admitted that it hadn't been easy. There were still days when the old doubts and insecurities crept in, but she had learned to counter them with self-compassion and the knowledge that she was worthy of love and respect. She had built a support network of friends and mentors who believed in her, and she had discovered a wellspring of inner strength that she hadn't known existed. As we wrapped up our visit, Emily walked me to the door. Before I left, she hugged me tightly and thanked me for being there for her all those years. I told her that it had been a privilege to witness her growth and that I was incredibly proud of the person she had become.